It's late. You're lying still. Your body isn't moving. Your breathing is slow. Everything around you is quiet, and yet, your mind is doing something else entirely. It's not loud. It's not one specific thought demanding attention. It's more like a current. A gentle, continuous movement of ideas and images and half-formed questions, passing through one after another, without asking permission, without any particular order, without any apparent destination. You think about something you said 3 days ago. Then somehow you're thinking about the ocean. Then about a conversation you had years ago that you haven't thought about in months. Then about whether you turned something off before you got into bed. Then about something that doesn't even fully form before it's replaced by something else. You've been trying to stop it, willing it to slow down, telling yourself to just stop thinking. But the more you try to stop, the more it keeps moving. What if you stop trying to stop it? What if instead of pushing against the current, you just followed it? Tonight, that's what we're going to do. Not force anything. Not explain anything. Just drift one thought at a time, wherever they go. There's a belief most people carry into bed with them, that a quiet mind is a stopped mind, that the goal is silence, total, thoughtless silence. And so every night becomes a small battle, you against your own thoughts, trying to produce a stillness that your mind simply isn't built for. But here is something worth considering. Your mind was not designed to stop. Not when you're awake, not fully even when you're asleep. The default state of a human brain is not silence. It is motion, a continuous low-level generation of associations, questions, memories, projections. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network, the system that activates when you're not focused on a specific task. When there's no external demand pulling your attention outward, it turns inward, and it moves. So the thoughts you're trying to stop tonight are not a malfunction. They are your mind doing exactly what minds do, in the particular quiet of a late-night room, with nothing else to process. What changes when you stop fighting them is not that they disappear. It's that they stop feeling like a problem. They become something closer to weather, passing through, some of them interesting, some of them strange, most of them not requiring anything from you at all. So let's not stop them tonight. Let's just follow where they go. Have you ever noticed the exact moment a thought appears? Not a thought you were building toward? Not the next logical step in something you were already considering? A thought that just arrived from nowhere obvious, about something completely unrelated to whatever came before it. You were thinking about work, and then suddenly you're thinking about a specific afternoon from when you were 9 years old. You were almost asleep. And then a question appears fully formed about something you haven't thought about in years. Where did that come from? The honest answer is, we don't entirely know. Neuroscience has mapped a great deal about the brain, the structures, the networks, the electrical patterns of activity. But the precise mechanism by which a specific thought, this thought right now about this particular thing, gets generated and delivered to your conscious awareness is still not fully understood. The thought arrives, and you become aware of it. But the process between those two events, between the non-thought and the thought, remains in important ways a mystery. Which means that right now, lying in the dark, your mind is producing things that even the people who study minds for a living cannot fully explain. Think about a word, any word. Now think about how it arrived. Did you choose it? Or did it just appear when you created the space for something to appear? There's a philosophical question buried in that, about the relationship between you and your thoughts, whether you are the one thinking them or the one they happen to. Most of the time the distinction doesn't matter, but at 3 a.m. lying still in the dark, it starts to feel relevant. If you're not choosing your thoughts, who is? Let that one float for a moment. Don't answer it, just let it sit there, turning slowly, like everything else tonight. There's probably one thought that keeps coming back. You know the one. You've processed it already, multiple times. You've turned it over from every angle you can find. You've reached conclusions, provisional and otherwise. You've decided how you feel about it, and then 10 minutes later, it's back. Same thought, same loop, starting from the same place and moving through the same sequence, arriving at the same almost conclusion, and then circling back to the beginning. Why does the mind do this? Part of the answer is simple. Unresolved things stay active. The brain has a bias toward completion. When something is finished, a task, a conversation, an experience that has been fully processed, it gets filed, it becomes memory, accessible but not intrusive. But when something is unresolved, when there's an open question, an unexplained moment, something that didn't end the way you expected, it stays in a different kind of storage. Active storage, where it can be retrieved automatically, without your permission, at inconvenient hours. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect, named after a Soviet psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik, who noticed in the 1920s that waiters could remember every detail of an unpaid order and forget it almost immediately once the bill was settled. The incomplete task demands a different kind of attention than the complete one. It keeps a small light on, stays ready to be resumed. So the thought that keeps returning tonight, the loop that won't close, is not your mind being cruel, it is your mind being faithful, returning to something it considers unfinished, something it wants to resolve. The problem is that some things don't resolve, some loops don't close. Not tonight, not because you haven't thought hard enough, but because the missing piece isn't something you can find by thinking. And the mind, not knowing this, keeps trying, keeps returning, keeps circling. Maybe the question isn't how to close the loop. Maybe it's how to be in the loop without being consumed by it. That shift from solving to sitting is harder than it sounds, but it's the direction the next thought is going. Some thoughts aren't problems. They just feel like problems because your mind is used to treating every thought as something to be resolved, processed, filed, moved past. But some thoughts aren't asking to be resolved. They're asking to be held. Why does music produce emotion? Not what happens in the brain when it does. Why? Why should a particular arrangement of sound waves moving through air create a feeling of sadness or longing or joy in a creature made of matter? There is no fully satisfying answer to that question. There are partial answers, evolutionary theories, neurological observations, but none of them quite close the gap between the physical fact of sound and the experience of being moved by it. That gap remains, and it's one of the most interesting places in the entire landscape of human understanding. Or this one. Why does anything exist rather than nothing? Not how the universe came to be in its current form. Why there is something rather than a complete, total, unbroken absence of everything. This question has been asked by philosophers for centuries, and the honest answer, the truly honest answer, is that nobody knows. Nobody has come close to knowing. The question may be unanswerable in principle, not because we lack information, but because the question reaches past the edges of what any mind can actually think about. These aren't frustrating questions, they're freeing ones, because they remind you that the universe is not a problem you are responsible for solving. That there are things which are real and present and completely genuine, that don't require your resolution, that are allowed to simply be unanswered, open, alive with not knowing. Here is another one. What was happening on this exact piece of ground, wherever you are right now, 1,000 years ago, not in broad historical strokes, in the specific texture of daily life, what the light looked like, what sounds exist, what a person lying on this ground or near it was thinking about as they tried to sleep. You will never know, and somehow that not knowing opens something rather than closes it. There's a feeling you probably know. It doesn't have a sharp edge. It's not anxiety exactly, not sadness, not longing for something specific, more like a vague awareness that something isn't quite complete. That somewhere in the background of your life, there is a question you haven't asked yet, or an answer you're circling around without quite landing on. The Portuguese call it saudade, a word that doesn't translate cleanly into English. A kind of melancholy longing for something that may never have fully existed, or that exists but is absent, or that you're not sure you ever had, but miss anyway. There's something in the human experience that keeps reaching, past what is known, past what is explained, towards something that doesn't have a name yet, maybe never will. Children feel it, that particular quality of a late summer afternoon when you were young, the light going gold, the day ending, and a feeling that arrived without explanation, something between beauty and sadness that you didn't have the language for then, that you still don't have the language for now. You grew up, you got words for many things. But that particular feeling, the one that arrived in the gold light, never got a word because it doesn't fit in one, because it points at something larger than language can hold. And here is what's interesting about that feeling. It appears most often at the edges, at dusk, in the moment between sleeping and waking, in music that almost resolves but doesn't quite, in late-night rooms where the ordinary structures of the day have gone quiet, like this one. Right now, maybe the feeling of something missing isn't pointing at an absence. Maybe it's pointing at the limits of what the mind can hold, and the presence of something just beyond those limits. Something real. That doesn't fit inside the containers you have. That thought doesn't need to go anywhere. Just let it sit there. It knows where it is. You've spent a lot of tonight trying to think the right thoughts, trying to stop thinking, trying to find the version of lying still that finally tips into sleep, trying to figure something out, trying to resolve something, trying to get somewhere. What would it feel like to stop trying? Not to give up, just to release the effort, to let the thoughts do whatever they're going to do without you managing them. There is a state between sleeping and waking. Scientists call it hypnagogia, the threshold consciousness, the place where the logical mind begins to soften, and images, sounds, sensations arrive without being generated, without being chosen, where the control relaxes just enough for something else to come through. People in this state sometimes hear their names spoken, see faces they don't recognize, have thoughts that feel profound in the moment and dissolve by morning, experience colors or geometric patterns on the backs of their eyelids. You pass through this state every night, on the way to sleep, usually without noticing, because by the time it happens, the part of you that would notice has already let go. What if you let go a little earlier tonight? Not all the way, just enough. Enough to stop correcting the thoughts, enough to stop redirecting, enough to watch what the mind produces when you stop curating it. It might surprise you. The mind, left without a task, often finds its way somewhere interesting, somewhere gentle, some thread you haven't followed in a while. That turns out to be exactly the one you needed. Or it might not go anywhere particular. It might just slow, the way a river slows when it reaches flat, wide ground. Not stopping, just spreading out, losing urgency, finding its own pace. And at some point, without you noticing the exact moment, the thoughts begin to space out. The intervals between them grow. A thought arrives, drifts through. And then a little more space, and then another thought, quieter than the last, and then space. You don't make this happen. You just stop preventing it. You don't need your mind to stop tonight. You never did. You just needed it to slow, to stop feeling like a problem, to become what it actually is. Just thoughts. Just the ordinary movement of a mind that has been taking in the world all day and is now in its own time, in its own way, processing it. The thought about what you said. It doesn't need to be resolved tonight. The question you can't quite form. It will still be there when you're ready for it. The feeling you don't have words for. It doesn't need words. It's allowed to exist without them. The loop that kept returning. It's quieter now. Not because you solved it, because you stopped fighting it. And things we stop fighting eventually have nowhere left to go. Right now in this room, somewhere between thinking and not thinking, your mind is doing what it has always known how to do, finding its way toward rest, not because you forced it, because you finally let it. The thoughts are still there, but softer now, more spread out, more like clouds than like traffic. Moving at their own pace, going where they go. You don't have to follow them anymore. You can just watch, from a little further back, a little quieter, a little less involved. And somewhere in that watching, without deciding to, without trying to, you'll cross the threshold into the other place. The one that doesn't have thoughts, that doesn't have questions, that doesn't have anything unresolved. Just rest, rest.